Isaiah chapter 9 this morning. Isaiah chapter 9. And what happens this time of year is many people celebrate what they call Advent. It's not an official holiday found in Scripture, but it is like Thanksgiving, like Christmas, a great time to remember. The word Advent means the coming. And we remember the coming of Jesus. We remember not just that he came in the flesh, which was massive, but also that he is coming again. And so we're in the time between the once upon a time and the happily ever after, right? And so what I would like to do as we go for the next 4 weeks is to look at different aspects of the significance of Jesus coming. And a lot of times people will light a candle to think about, to represent the coming of Jesus and the light that he brings. And it's not a sacrament like the Lord's Supper or baptism, but it is something that does help us to remember. And so I would like to ask Tabitha to come up and light this candle for us. This is my daughter, Tabitha. She's wearing purple, and a lot of times these candles are associated with the color purple, and it signifies the penance that we need to have as we are reminded of the holiness that came when Jesus came. And so it also represents royalty. So we're going to be in Isaiah chapter 9 this morning, and I'd like to read a few facts to you about what if the sun went out, just like tomorrow, the sun was just gone. Okay, what would happen? And I didn't do the math on this, but I'm just going to trust what the author wrote. Within a week, the average global surface temperature would drop below 0 degrees Fahrenheit. In a year, it would dip to negative 100. The top layers of the oceans would freeze over, but in an apocalyptic irony, that ice would insulate the deep water below and prevent the oceans from freezing solid for hundreds of thousands of years. Millions of years after that, our planet would reach a stable negative 400 degrees. The temperature at which the heat radiating from the planet's core would equal the heat that the Earth radiates into space. And explains David Stevenson, blah, 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 smart guy. I'm not going to read all the letters after his name. Although some microorganisms living in the Earth's crust would survive, the majority of life would enjoy only a brief post-sun experience. Photosynthesis would halt immediately. Most plants would die in a few weeks. However, large trees could survive several decades thanks to slow metabolism and substantial sugar stores. With the food chain's bottom tier knocked out, most animals would die quickly, but scavengers picking over the dead remains could last until the cold killed them. Humans could live in submarines in the deepest and warmest parts of the ocean. Okay, that's probably enough of that, right? I was kind of surprised at how long we might have if the sun went out. It doesn't sound like a sunny picture, but you might have time to get on Facebook and say goodbye to your friends and, try to build a submarine and figure that out. But, but we do need the sun, right? I mean, that surprised me. Some large trees could survive several decades. Like, whoa, I didn't realize that. Didn't realize how long it would take the Earth to get as cold as it does, because it feels like it's already that temperature here. But the thing is, imagine how much more we need the Son of God, right? What if Jesus had never come? What if Jesus wasn't coming back? We can imagine with horror what our planet would be like if the sun went out, but what if Jesus had never come? So we're going to look in the book of Isaiah, and we're going to examine this thought, and as we read these words, I'd like for you to just read them in gratitude for the fact that Jesus did come. He came in the flesh, and we believe that Jesus Christ is fully man, and he's fully God. He existed eternally with the Father before the foundation of the world, and the world was created through him, for him, and by him. And Jesus, eternally coexisting with God, they never had a need to create humanity because there was some kind of deficiency. Right? They weren't lonely, they weren't bored, they had each other, the Father, Son, and the Spirit. But rather, humanity isn't a result of them needing affection or needing companionship, but rather an overflow of what eternally existed within them. And so, when I was a kid, I had a goldfish, I had a fiddler crab, had a pet mouse, had a frog, had a pet turtle, and they all kept just dying, right? But I would get another pet every once in a while because I was bored, right? And I wanted to look at this little critter and be entertained. But we were not created because God was bored or lonely or had some kind of something that he needed more of, but rather he wanted to share himself with us. And so Isaiah says, "Therefore, nevertheless, there will be no more gloom for those who are in distress. In the past, he humbled the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali, but in the future, he will honor Galilee of the nations by the way of the sea beyond the Jordan." So Isaiah chapter 9 starts up a prophecy of the coming of Jesus Christ the Messiah. And he mentions the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali. These were children of the 12 tribes of Israel, and these were on the borders, northern borders, and they were right there at the border of the Gentile nations. And this town, Galilee, of course, is a very small town. And when we read that there will be no more gloom for those who are in distress, it reminds us that these people were in distress. They were in distress. They were oppressed. They went through horrific things. We're reminded of what Ukraine is going through. And imagine you're in a village and there's these enemy armies overtake your homeland and destroy your houses and take your children away. These people went through that. And nevertheless, they're told there will be no more gloom for those who are in distress, but instead, honor. What does this mean? We're going back into chapter 8. It says, "They will look toward the earth and see only distress and darkness and fearful gloom, and they will be thrust into utter darkness." The northern tribes of Israel went through this distress. We read about it in 2 Kings. At the time of Pekah, king of Israel, Tiglath-Pileser, king of Assyria, came and took Ijon, Abel, Beth, Makkah, Genoa, Kadesh, and Hazor. You have to read it faster than that if you want to sound like you know how to say the word. But he took Gilead and Galilee, including all the land of Naphtali, and deported the people to Assyria. These people were deported, much like the Africans living on the western coast during the transatlantic slave trade, just taken away from their homes and never returned. And so how can God say there will be no more gloom for these people? They lost everything. How can he say that? Well, it's because God was going to give them everything. In Matthew chapter 4, we read that when Jesus heard that John had been put in prison, he withdrew to Galilee. Leaving Nazareth, he went and lived in Capernaum, which was by the lake in the area of Zebulun and Naphtali, to fulfill what was said through the prophet Isaiah, "Land of Zebulun and land of Naphtali, the way of the sea beyond the Jordan, Galilee of the Gentiles. The people living in darkness have seen a great light. On those living in the land of the shadow of death, a light has dawned." And from that time on, Jesus began to preach, "Repent, for the kingdom of heaven has come near." People living in darkness have seen a great light. Again, imagine if Jesus had never come. Even the Israelites who had the law of God found themselves offering their own children on altars. Hosea reminded us that these people would put their infants on burning hot altars. Even the Israelites who had the law of God. Imagine what all the other people on the face of the earth have done. And think about what this planet would be like if Jesus had not come. There would be no Western civilization, there would be no democracy, there would be no human rights because there wasn't before Jesus came. People were considered property at best. And so this is in the context of Jesus walking this earth, and his precursor, John the Baptizer, the one who came and prepared the way for Messiah, he is now in prison. And Jesus hears about it. He goes to Capernaum, and he's fulfilling this prophecy here. He goes to the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali. He goes to the outer fringes and the edges of Israel. He goes to the small town. And this was a place that was despised because it was so, how do you say, in Greek the word is podunk, right? It's a dull, man. Maybe y'all don't know what that word is because you're not from the South. But what does that podunk mean? Little, right? And this is the remarkable thing. What if you had been planning to send a man into the world who would change history, and then thousands of years later he would have billions of followers, and he would change multiple societies, and people would base their life off of his teaching? How would you send this man into the world? Right? You might think maybe he could just simply fly or float down, all the spotlights on him, and just a huge... I went to a concert once. Somebody invited me to a free ticket. It was a U2 concert. And I had never been to a concert like that, ever. They had speakers like as big as this room. And it blew me away, right? And that was just U2, right? And that was just like some mortals presenting a good show for a few thousand people. Imagine what God could have done when he sent his son into the world. Imagine the light show. The galaxies light up and spin around, and Jesus comes down into the center, and the stars are singing. But no, he was born to a virgin girl, and she and Joseph had to kind of hide because it was scandalous. People didn't understand. People didn't know why she was with child. They didn't know who this baby was. And there was no place. They had to travel. Imagine, I hate traveling. I love to travel, but I hate to travel because there's no place like home. Right? I don't sleep well when I'm on the road. The food I eat doesn't feel like this is the food that makes me feel healthy and good. It's just, there's always something on the road, right? It's not your bed, it's not your house. And years ago when Cheryl and I visited here, we made a trip and we had to drive to Denver, and our flight wasn't until early next morning. So all along the way from South Fork to Denver, we were calling, trying to find a hotel. Summertime, there was not a single hotel between here and Denver. Right? So we had to sleep in the car, and thankfully it was summer, not winter. But we ended up at a fairground that was just empty, and we parked the car and slept. And Toyota Corolla is not my choice of a bed, right? The next morning we get out, and there's like horse droppings or cow or whatever, because it was a fairground and there had been livestock there. I almost stepped in it in my socks. But being on the road, right? Imagine traveling, not in a Toyota Corolla, on a donkey, and you have to have a baby.
Yeah.
Wow. And there was, again, no room made for them. Some of y'all have had babies, right?
Yeah.
Imagine. Sorry, we don't have any room. You're going to have to sleep in the barn. That's how Jesus came into the world. No light show, and yet the people living in darkness have seen a great light. On those living in the land of the shadow of death, a light has dawned. Wow. Those living in the land of the shadow of death. The psalmist wrote, even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, you're with me. And Jesus sure was. Isaiah goes on. The people walking in darkness have seen a great light. On those living in the land of deep darkness, a light has dawned. You have enlarged the nation and increased their joy. They rejoice before you as people rejoice at the harvest, as warriors rejoice when dividing the plunder. God had made a promise to Abraham that he would be the father of many nations. And we understand from Paul's writing that this wasn't just the Isaac and Ishmael and Edomites. This was all the Gentiles, the Jews and non-Jews, all of creation. And God says to the prophet Isaiah, for as in the day of Midian's defeat, you have shattered the yoke that burdens them. Remember Midian? Gideon was told, go fight Midian. They had camels that said like sand on the sea, these warrior camels, and these massive armies. Gideon had several thousand people in his army, and God sent them all home until he only had 300 left. And anyway, what God does with those 300 men is he causes the Midianites to start fighting and killing each other. And so this army just destroys itself. There's a great victory. And Isaiah writes, you've shattered the yoke that burdens them, the bar across their shoulders, the rod of their oppressor. Every warrior's boot used in the battle and every garment rolled in blood will be destined for burning, will be fuel for the fire. One day, Isaiah writes, there will be no remnants, no artifact of war and this destruction and the fact that these people were oppressed. Will be victory given by God. And as God enlarges the nation, he increases their joy. He fulfills the promise to Abraham that he would not only become a great nation, but also be a blessing to all the nations. And again, this was fulfilled when Jesus came. Deuteronomy says, the Lord will cause your enemies who rise against you to be defeated before you. They shall come out against you one way and flee before you 7 ways. And Luke, behold, I have given you authority, Jesus says to his disciples, to tread on serpents and scorpions and over all the power of the enemy, and nothing shall hurt you. And then Isaiah, no weapon that's fashioned against you shall succeed, and you shall refute every tongue that rises against you in judgment. This is the heritage of the servants of the Lord, and their vindication from me, declares the Lord. Not only is their yoke shattered and the rod broken, but they also receive the spoil. All the wealth that these enemies had amassed is now given to the Israelites. Remember when the Israelites were escaping slavery in Egypt, and God said, go to your Egyptian neighbor, ladies, and just ask them, can I have your gold? Can I have your jewelry? And God opened their heart, and the Egyptian woman said, yeah, here you go. Wait, I've got some earrings in the back room. Let me go get those. Sounds like one of those good deals, right? Like one of those jewelry parties, except it's free. And it says, the Bible says that thus Israel plundered Egypt They had been enslaved under their yoke, and now God says, you're going to plunder them. But ultimately, in Colossians, you who are dead in your trespasses and the uncircumcision of your flesh, God made alive together with him, having forgiven us all our trespasses by canceling the record of debt that stood against us with its legal demands. This he set aside, nailing it to the cross, and he disarmed the rulers and authorities and put them to open shame by triumphing over them in him. The ultimate enemy is not the Egyptians, not the Babylonians. Your ultimate enemy isn't the Midianites or even Satan. Your ultimate enemy is you. You're the one that's responsible for the sin that you carry. I'm the one that's responsible for the sin I carry. And yet Jesus triumphed over all these things. He's forgiven us all our trespasses. And so just like Isaiah says that the yoke will be gone, that heavy burden, those shackles will be gone, the rod that was used to keep you in line and to keep you submissive and humble under their thumb, those things will be gone, and you will share the plunder. Now we are also sharing glory with Jesus. The enemy is gone, the enemy is defeated. Jesus triumphed over all those things on the cross, and now we share in his glory. So Isaiah goes on to say, for to us a child is born, to us a son is given, the government will be on his shoulders. We don't want to be ungoverned. We want to be governed. We want a leader. We want someone to follow. And Isaiah says this promise will be fulfilled because to us a child is born. We have a friend who's pregnant in Florida. Her name's Woodland. She's originally from Haiti. Sweetest girl you'll ever meet. Say girl, she's 40. She's a girl. But her baby's 3 pounds and she's almost there to the due date. Right? So she's trying to gain weight. We're praying for the baby, praying for her. And it just reminded me that Jesus was that size once. Jesus was 3 pounds at one point in Mary's womb. Unto us a child is born and a son is given. Not earned, but an act of God's grace. The government will be on his shoulders. This 3-pound baby was able to carry the weight of heaven and earth. Able to rule, and he will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. What a title. What a title. They narrowed it down to just Jesus, King of the Jews, and put that on the cross. There's so much more than that. The Pharisees say, no, you should say he said he was King of the Jews. God said, what I've written, I've written. At least he got that, but that was just so inadequate to describe what he really is. Not just King of the Jews, but Prince of Heaven, Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, and Prince of Peace. Of the greatness of his government and peace, there will be no end. We often struggle with what's called the problem of evil. How can evil exist if God is powerful and good and wise? But we have to have faith that ultimately and finally, the last word is peace. The last word is reconciliation. The last word is healing, renewal. The last word is new heavens and new earth. The last word is that although Jesus wept here and now when he was on this earth, when Lazarus died, again, he knew he was going to raise him from the dead, and he still wept. He cries with us now, even though he knows one day every tear will be wiped from our eyes. He weeps with us now, but one day he will wipe away every tear. His government is peace with no end. And Paul said that this same peace that surpasses all understanding, what does that mean? It means it doesn't make sense. This peace doesn't make logical sense. And yet, when you look at the big story, the whole picture, we realize, yeah, he can do that. I can have peace because I know what he did in the past. I know he came, and I know he's coming again. And he will reign on David's throne and rule over his kingdom, establishing and upholding it with justice and righteousness. From that time on and forever, the zeal of the Lord Almighty will accomplish this. You love this Jesus? You love this gift? The dawn of hope, the Son who came into the world, shone light into our hearts to deliver us from darkness. Be reminded as we typically think about the coming of Jesus, the birth of Jesus this time of year, what that means, the significance of it. We know that he wasn't just born to become a Hallmark card. He wasn't just born to be a manger scene in our yards. But he was born in the way he did to represent the way in which he would also die. And we're reminded that if he came once, he's going to come again. If God could empty himself, to pour himself out like he did and come in the form of a servant, not just a servant, but a servant destined to die. We read in Romans, if God would give us his own Son, how will he not with him give us all things? So this Prince of Peace came and suffered, this wonderful counselor. The world conspired against him. The heads of state came and conspired against him. And put him to death. And yet, his sacrifice, his death, brings us hope. So we remember the dawn of hope. Just like the sun comes up in the morning. I don't know if you've ever been in a situation where it's dark and you were... I was in Nepal and there were no lights in this village I was in, and I was trying to find my way to get some water. I was parched, and I couldn't see anything. I couldn't see if I was about to step off a mountain. I heard water. I was just trying to make my way towards it, but thankfully I didn't end up in a crevasse. But when that light dawned, I was so thankful. It gave me what I needed to have life. We're going to celebrate communion this morning. God bless you as we partake of the bread and the wine.